Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when you accidentally scratch your copy of a universally beloved PS4 launch title? So you've got nothing to do, so you have to go out and cut down rice in the fields and feed your pup.
I don't know. What do you call it?
Uh,
Yeah?
you call it Knick Knack, Paddywhack, give the dog a bone. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your, I don't know, host Madelyn. Your Knack baby host Madelyn.
I'm your 50 games host, Emma.
I'm your, this mashup is dead on arrival host Madelyn.
You just make Knack again, but you put it in a little collection of 50 more Knacks.
50 Knacks.
So, we spoiled the end of the episode, but hope you'll stick around regardless.
It's fine. You want the whole journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. This week we're talking about Knack, and UFO 50.
Yeah. Two equally important, high-quality games.
Critically acclaimed to equal measure.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah.
In scope.
Both very revolutionary, you know?
Yes.
Creative.
Absolutely.
Unique.
We can't. Imagine if we also tried to do the, Knack is a masterpiece.
Well, I do think Knack is, the originator of that, meme that evolves and crops up every now and then, the $Morbillion, you know?
No.
When Morbius was going to make $Morbillion.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
So thanks, Knack.
It was very originated from the Knack meme. Knack 2, baby. Knack greatest game of all time. Sort of joking around thing.
This episode is for the donkey viewers.
Yeah. I did watch his Knack 2 video out of
me too.
Need for historical knowledge, really.
It felt wrong to not have the context. It was a reasonably funny video. There were some things in there that wouldn't have made in my video, but it was, silly enough.
I just, I know nothing about Donkey, okay? He published Animal Well, so good for him. But I cannot stand to listen to him talk. I don't know if it's his normal voice in the videos. I think he must be putting on some kind of voice, but it makes me wish for release. So...
Speaking of game releases, Knack is a beat-em-up platformer, although a platformer that de-emphasizes jumping.
Yes.
So let's see where that goes. From Japan Studios, RIP, published by Sony for the PS4 in 2013. Can you believe, by the way, that our old games are now coming from the PS4?
I know. It is a launch title, to be fair.
It's a launch title.
Yeah. Yes, Knack, the most impressive launch title they could have picked for...
Yes. Look, so we'll get to this, right? But obviously they were trying to do something with Knack that was not really about critical reviews, and that failed too. But, so Knack is about Knack, who's like a kind of a robot sort of dude, more or less. Not a robot, like a creature, automaton, I guess. Who's made up of a conscious relic, and he can add things to his body and become bigger and smaller and take on different characteristics as a result of that. They talk in every interview that this game is a mix of Crash Bandicoot and Katamari Damacy, which to be 100% fair, it does sound a little bit like a game that we might make as a mashup.
Yeah.
If we were trying to mash up Crash Bandicoot and Katamari Damacy, and that is not meant complimentary.
Well, for what it's worth, the director was Mark Cerny, who is probably mainly known now for being the lead system architect at Sony. If you watch the PS5 Pro presentations recently, you've seen Mark Cerny. And he did work on like the original Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah, he pops up as a consultant on like any Sony game you could look at.
Yeah. He described the design of Knack, by the way, or someone told him that he looks like a robot made out of Toblerone.
That tracks. Knack was kind of intended to be a PS4 mascot character. The game did not do well, so that didn't really go, but intended.
Yeah, that was the pitch as per Cerny and Shuhei Yoshida and anyone who's ever talked about it, was very much like Crash Bandicoot for the PS4, right? Because Naughty Dog had made their shift, to character stories.
They invented narrative just shortly before this.
They just invented narrative, finally.
Yeah.
And so it was pitched as basically
everyone's out there being like, they're like laughing at Donkey for loving Knack. Meanwhile, every episode they're like, Naughty Dog invented narrative. It's our Knack. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it is our Knack. It was very much pitched like, okay, let's make like a new sort of mascot character for the PS4. Let's make like a game that for the whole family can play, right? Let's not get too, lost in our cinematic adult adventure kind of land, which that didn't work. So
you can feel the Wii like looming behind all of these interviews.
Yeah.
You could like the Nintendo Wii like just sitting there on everyone's shelf.
Yeah.
As these people talk about Knack.
Yeah.
Because yes, over and over they're like, we know the gamers are going to buy this console, but we want other people to buy it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, Knack is about the Toblerone robot and his creator and some other folks who they live in a world where like there are evil goblins, basically. It's in the future. There's some technology. They use relics to harness technological power. And the goblins don't do that. They're like savages, right?
Sure.
But they've started attacking human cities with weapons that they shouldn't have. And so Knack and pals go try to figure out where they got their weapons and then save the world, etc., etc. It's a lot more story than Crash Bandicoot has ever really had.
I don't know if we really...
It's a lot more story than the first Crash Bandicoot ever had. How about that?
I read about this. They
were like,
CTR.
it has 2 minutes of story. It's like the first Crash Bandicoot cannot have any story.
I feel like we mostly played Crash Team Racing.
Which has a riveting story.
And not actually many of the normal Bandicoot games, so...
We played Crash Bash, too. Bring it back.
Oh, yeah. We just played the Crash Party games, which is extremely funny to think about now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big thing about Knack is he gets bigger and smaller.
He does.
As you incorporate relics throughout the levels. So he can be like child size and he can be like big mecha sized, essentially, based on how much you've put into him.
Yeah, he can be big boy and small boy. And that's pretty much the game.
Yeah.
He's got like 3 buttons.
Yep.
Which, to be fair, Crash Bandicoot, 2 buttons.
Yeah.
So you can certainly make a game with limited buttons. But people were not really into Knack. Which, look, being a launch game it's just bad.
Yeah. You really don't want to be a launch game.
Like, on one hand, you do, right? But on the other hand, you just really don't want to be a launch game.
Yeah.
Because the expectations were just really high, and there's like a big hype cycle around the game, and then it was like, fine.
Yes, it's not really a game, and it wasn't really meant to be fair, right? It was like a launch game to feel like, oh, this console's welcoming to everybody, was like the intention of making it the launch game. But at the time, I think that a lot of people were looking at a new console launch to be like, okay, here's the huge technological jump that this console is making, right? Because we were still in a time when we believed that new consoles meant huge technological jumps. And it just wasn't, it didn't display that, right? at all. And so people were mostly confused, I think, by Knack.
Well, it was a game that was trying to be a lot of things for a lot of people. In all the pre-release stuff, they talk a lot. Again, it's Mark Cerny primarily doing these interviews, and a little bit of Shuhei Yoshida, who I can't remember exactly what his title was at Sony at the time, but like big Sony guy, right? Do a lot of talking about
president at the time, I think.
So they do a lot of talking about how they wanted to make a game, and like whenever anyone is saying this, it's like, oh, like this is kind of a red flag. You saying this when they're like, we want to make a game that's welcoming to first-time gamers and that long-time gamers can enjoy, right? And that's possible to do, but it's hard, especially if you're targeting something. He talked a little bit, Mark Cerny, in one of the interviews too, I think, like afterwards, about how, when you're making a game, you actually sometimes don't want to make the first level first because you want your first level to be really good. And if you make it first, like you haven't figured out how things work yet. And so it's probably not going to be as good. So like you often want to start with the middle levels. And like, so that's what you're play testing first. And he was like, but like new gamers, like absolutely could not jump into the middle levels. They didn't know what was going on. They couldn't figure it out. So we like we couldn't really test for those people until much later. And it just sounds like it's really hard, right? It's really hard to be like trying to make a game that's for everyone. And we'll probably talk about that in like a very different context with our new game.
Yeah.
And like in trying to be a game that had something for everyone and like was also quite family friendly, it just kind of was a little bit of nothing.
Yeah. I think in one of the interviews I read for Knack 2, I can't remember if it was Polygon or the Mashable one I read. It was Mashable. Cerny was talking about that making a game. Here's the quote. Making a game that literally anyone is able to play can easily become a game that few actually want to play.
Yeah.
Which I think is true. You need some element of specificity in there. Which I think that the initial Knack was just lacking. But they did make Knack 2, which sort of, fueled the meme more.
It did.
Because a very, mediocre game getting its sequel was prime comedy material.
You would certainly never, this is another, like, Madelyn makes a grand pronouncement about games now, right? But, like, sure. Knack would never get a sequel as a PS5 launch title. Not ever.
Well, it does have the advantage of it was made internally at Sony, right?
Right.
It's from one of their big guys, so he's got some sway and influence that I'm sure helped him, want to do this. They were like, okay, Mark, sure.
Yeah, like, keep working on the PS5, but yeah.
If Knack had been like a third-party game, no, they would not have made a sequel for it even then, I think.
I don't think even in a first party, they would have RIP Japan Studios, but they would have just shut down the studio. Sorry.
They have already shut down. In anticipation, they were like, you can't make Knack 3, Japan Studio. We must murder you.
Yeah. Do you think, oh boy, I can't believe that I'm going to say this out loud. What are your odds on Donkey publishing a Knack 3 at some point in his lifetime?
I think he would absolutely do it if the opportunity. I think he would absolutely go for the meme, I know that's not like the goal of his publishing company seems to be, like I know what games are good, so
yeah.
I don't know.
Knack 3 would be the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Knack 2, by the way, still did not get like great reviews, but most of the reviews were like, oh, like this really improved on Knack.
Yes, they added some jumping, for example.
Yes, into their platformer.
Yes.
Who would have guessed?
Not me. Can't imagine that.
Another time capsule thing I found really interesting in an interview with Shuhei Yoshida that was sort of much more broadly about the PS4 launch. I think this was Game Industry Biz. He talked about how, and I'm sure some of this is a little bit like disingenuous media speak, right? But he talked about how like, oh, we didn't really care about the review scores on this. I was hoping it could score in the mid-70s.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Mid-70s game now is like...
That's dead.
That's dead on arrival. And they were like, and he was like, now it's around 60, so I'm hoping it goes up. A game rated a 60 now? Just a career ending. A 70 is a career ender, frankly, but like a catastrophe beyond words. A game rated a 60.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny the ebb and flow of the Metacritic influence, right? Like, I feel like this was like PS3 era. You used to read all these stories about like people whose bonuses were dependent on the Metacritic score. Yep. Like, oh, they have to get a 72 in order to have enough food to feed their family or whatever. And then I felt like there was a little bit of backlash to that, and Metacritic got sort of de-emphasized for a time. And now it's like back with a vengeance. Like, everybody needs to know the Metacritic score. Everybody needs to know how many concurrent players are on Steam, you know.
Yep.
And I feel like Knack hit during that time where they were a little less concerned with that. But I think that time has gone again. Oh, to return to the halcyon days of Knack. You know?
Don't we wish we could bring Knack back?
Knack will return.
Knack will return. No, it's just really dull. I don't know. They described it as a mix of Crash and Katamari Damacy with a touch of God of War in one of these articles. And I'm like, man, would love a game that was actually like that.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be kind of sick. They also talked about, they were like, well, originally we were doing like this thing with Knack where, and like this is where you see the Katamari influence, right? Because I think in the real game, like, why would you ever think this was influenced by Katamari? Just because he's a guy who has some stuff stuck to him.
Yeah.
But originally they were like, oh, we kind of wanted it where like Knack would like jump through walls and stuff would attach to him, right? Katamari. And they said the problem with that though is that he essentially just turned into kind of a giant armor blob. And it's like, well, yes. Have you thought about the influence, like the game that you were influenced by in doing that? Like, of course he was going to turn into a giant armor blob. That's what a Katamari is.
Yeah.
So it makes sense why that sort of disappeared. But also, here I am again, being like, more games like Katamari, please. I'll make a genre, a Katamari Knack-vania, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Katamari Knack Attack. Nakamari.
Nakamari is pretty good.
They are not anything like each other. I don't really want Knack in there.
There's another universe where we have the Nakamari genre is like thriving right now, you know?
If only. If only.
Nobody's heard of a Metroidvania before. Nobody knows what that is.
It did seem like even at this time, though, there was like a lot of concern about Japan Studio. There was one article with Mark Cerny that I read where he was like, yeah, like we kind of brought me in here because Japan Studios hadn't managed to make a million seller for the PS3. So we were trying to like take some lessons from Sony Santa Monica and bring it over to them. And like that failed.
It's because they made cool games, not
like Knack.
Like Knack. No, like other ones. Yeah. Didn't seem to get their million seller out of Knack. I don't know how well Knack sold, actually.
Who knows? It was like a bundled game with the PlayStation in Japan, so that skews sales, certainly.
Yeah.
But yes, it is interesting to see, like, well, this game was like mostly a marketing tool, right? And so, of course, or a messaging tool, perhaps. And so, of course, like, what did you expect from that? Apparently what you expected was a 70, and you got a 60, so lesson learned.
Should have made Gravity Rush 3 instead.
Knack 3. Knack 3's coming, baby. Hope they make a prestige TV show out of Knack. Can you imagine?
they are, hunting through their catalog for things to adapt. So I bet they could make a Knack show.
I'm sure they could make a Knack show.
No, I mean like a kids animated show,
Okay. Yeah, I see that.
Not like a serious drama. They could make a prestige drama too, but I think that they can make a weird little Knack show if they wanted to.
Why do you think they didn't just do Crash Bandicoot?
I don't really know how. I mean, I guess they've made like remasters, re-releases of it, so I guess other companies can touch it, but I don't know if they need like permission. I don't know what the way that the name works. You know what I mean?
Sure. You don't think that Shuhei and Neil could have worked it out?
I mean, probably. It is interesting, like, I'm very curious after the release of Astrobot, for example, if they're going to try to do another like Ape Escape game. Because that's like one of the big featured games in that has not seen a release, in years.
A long time.
Was Ape Escape Japan Studio? No, I don't. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
It was.
So I'll be curious if they start being like, okay, let's think about bringing some of our nostalgia titles back, but just like giving them to other studios to make. Because that seems like the move, right? But they've never really done that, I feel like. They haven't really taken away things from other studios to give to new studios to make yet, at least in modern times, right? That feels right. Seems, other than like Blue Point doing like the remake stuff.
Sure,
but
of course.
Those aren't new
It
titles.
Just seems like a misstep. I mean, obviously in hindsight it seems like a misstep, but it's like if what you were basically trying to do, what you stated you were trying to do is essentially make a Crash Bandicoot game, it does sort of just feel like maybe you should have... Look, not me being like, new IP, blah, but, does sort of feel like for your console launch that maybe just making a Crash Bandicoot game might have been the better choice.
Yeah. Sony's very bad at keeping mascots.
Well, sure.
We gotta have a new one every few years.
Keep trying. Keep looking for the right one.
We got Astrobot now. When will Astrobot's great fall come,
When people get tired of the SSD song. So never.
Never.
Man, we gotta get Astrobot. Oh, there's so many games. I couldn't, by the way, this week, when did we pick this? 2 weeks ago? Yeah, so I actually think that I could not have played either of these games this time because I've not been with my PlayStation since this game was pulled from the hat. And UFO 50, which is probably time to start talking about, is only for Windows.
It's too bad.
And the Steam Deck.
I bet they'll bring it to console eventually.
Oh, yeah. I'm standing ready for the Switch port.
Yeah. All right, well, any last thoughts about Knack Baby?
Poor Knack Baby.
Poor little baby Knack.
Knack 3's coming, baby. I actually do think, I genuinely think that sometime in the next 10 years, Donkey will publish it.
I think they should make it a PS6 launch title. For comedy.
I think that would work.
Yeah?
I think Donkey's got enough of a following that if they did that, it could morb.
It'd sell a Knack-nillion copies.
Exactly. Exactly.
Good. Well, UFO 50. I did play some UFO 50.
I wish I could have played some UFO 50. Oh man, so much of this game is so Madelyn core.
Yeah.
Like everything around this game is so Madelyn core. And the more I read about it, the more upset that I was. You can't play it on the Mac.
Yes, I've tried 15 of 50 games.
Ugh, Emma, it's like you didn't even try to be ready for the show.
I'm sorry. I didn't even spend as much time as I wanted to on some of them because I was like, I should try a few more.
You're just like the Polygon reviewer. The Polygon reviewer was like, this was miserable. I was like, this was a really great game. You'll have more fun doing it than I did, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it just the deadline or something?
Yeah, it was. It was Grayson Morley. Was like, I really felt like I ought to have played at least some of every game. Mm-hmm. So I just had to kind of keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're, some of them are short, but most of them are like, well, you can just keep playing this,
It did remind me, and I say this to draw a contrast here, that there's a new WarioWare that I haven't bought, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even that new anymore.
The one where you have to, like, move around, I think, right?
Heck yeah. I could use some winter exercise.
I love the PlayStation Eye.
Don't we all?
Anyway, UFO 50 is a video game collection developed and published by Mossmouth, which is a small group of game designers who came together to work on this, including Spelunky Man, Derek Yu.
That's his legal name.
Yeah, so Spelunky Man is his first one.
Yeah.
And it's like a fake compilation of games from a fictional developer that like developed and published games in the 1980s. So it takes that sort of aesthetic and some inspiration from that design period in games, although they incorporate modern ideas into it as well. I think I read a few interviews where they were like, we use sort of the aesthetics as like a guidepost and a way to rein in like ideas and stuff, but we weren't too limited by like what they would have made in the 80s.
Yeah.
Which I think is the best way to do something like this. But yeah, they made like this fictional company that made these 50 games, and so you'll see like some of them have sequels within the collection. Sometimes you'll see recurring characters within the collection, and so on and so forth. But yeah, 51 actually. There's a hidden one apparently. Spoiler, I guess. But 50 complete games that you can play and enjoy in this package.
I'm just like, I love the fake company, fake dev notes, fake developer, like game directors, like building it's so interesting in both like the reviews and they're talking about it to be like, oh, like how did they decide what games were going to be in what order, and like how you can, and you wonder, it's hard to know sort of like, okay, how much of this was like really truly intentional and how much of this is people like buying into the mythology and seeing these patterns, but sort of the idea of, oh, like you see these, that these like fake developers have like certain styles, which like they did talk in some interviews. They were like, well, like the fake directors do like usually correspond to one of us, but like not 1-to-1. Or like, oh, you see the studio like technologically advance a little bit over the course of the thing. And like, that's crazy. That's a crazy thing to chart out for yourself and be able to put together. Really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, so the main people who started with this were Derek Yu and John Perry, who had worked on a lot of freeware games together in like the 90s and early 2000s.
They're like childhood friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And they decided they wanted to work on a game together again. So they decided to warm up by making like a bunch of game prototypes. And in doing this, decided like, what if this was just the game, essentially? So over the course of, like, 9 years, in which there was, like, a break where Spelunky 2 got made also. They put together UFO 50 with them, Eric Surek, that's not,
who's the composer.
And a couple of other people who came and, like, made, like, 1 or 2 games as well. Like some of the larger ones. And eventually came together to 50 games, which I think it was Derek Hugh who was saying, like, that just felt like the first number that was, like, that's something.
Solid.
You know? Like, that's a collection. Yeah. Right? That's attention grabbing sort of number.
I also thought it was funny in an interview with Edge magazine, John Perry said, you know, like, the games in the game have, like, fictional release dates from, like, 1982 to 1989 or something like that. And he was like, we worked out how long it would take a game company to make this. But, like, originally, when they announced this game like 2017 at PAX West, and they were like, it's coming out in 2018.
Yeah.
Which obviously didn't happen. So he was like, we worked out it would take, like, a company like 8 years to make these games. But for some reason, we didn't think it would take us 8 years. Which I thought was really funny. I mean, obviously, of course, in there, like, they pretty much, like, stopped working on it for what seems like a couple years at least to do Spelunky 2. So it's not like it was, like, a nonstop thing. But it also sounds like in some of the interviews with Derek Yu, he was like, well, originally we were thinking this could release as, like, a much more, like, kind of sketchy thing. And I think at some point they must have realized, like, what they had or... you know, felt like they had ambitions with it that were bigger and it needed more time to cook.
It's very cool. Like I said, I've just been going in chronological order, order, quote unquote. With
Did you hate Barbuda?
Is that the first one?
Yeah.
I didn't really understand Barbuda.
Yeah.
Some of these, I will say, because they're very, like, just drop you in.
Yeah. Very 80s
and
style, right? Like, they're not going to explain the controls.
Yes. So I was watching a, like, YouTube video, all 50 games explained from Xanagear on YouTube. Just, like, it was from pre-release, like, talking about, like, what games are featured, just so I could get a sense of the ones that I haven't played yet. And he taught me how to drop off my little guys in Magic Garden, which is a, like, Snake sort of game where you pick up these little guys, and then when I was playing it, I simply did not know what to do with the little guys. I was like, I assume I just make a really long chain, right, like Snake, but I was not getting any points for that. So what you actually do is go to the star panels, and while the little guys are on the star panels, you do a little spin and you drop them off, and that's how you get points. So maybe I will go back to that game and actually get a score in it. I also played Bushido Ball.
Everybody loves Bushido Ball.
I don't know how to do each character's, like, unique ability.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look up what button this is, because I just know how to hit the ball, how to roll, and I finally, after, like, 30 matches, figured out how to do the charge attack and what that was.
Bushido Ball is like a Pong, or, like, everyone compares it to Windjammers.
Yeah.
Kind of like samurai hitting stuff back and forth at each other sports thing.
It's like volleyball, except you're, like, hitting it with your sword, essentially. Yeah. A lot of these games also feature either co-op or versus modes. So, and Bushido Ball is one of those. Yeah.
This is why I'm so excited. Like, they need to port it.
Yeah.
I just feel like I would like to play this game.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of them where it's like, just figure it out. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
It was interesting to me to think about, you know, this game is a real testament to what you get to do when you make a wildly and unexpectedly successful game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Spelunky just a like giant hit, right? And then like Spelunky 2, I think even more so, really. And like the idea that you're going to spend like almost a decade more or less charting out the history of like a fake game company from 40 years ago. Like, that's an insane project.
I mean, it's also just a testament of like the benefits of having collaborators that you like to work with.
Yeah, they talk about that a lot.
You know, of like just having like a group of, you know, there's the whole, your work should not be your life necessarily, and your company should not be your family or whatever, but sometimes you can get together with a group of friends and make something cool because it's fun, and that's cool.
Well, the Polygon review talked about this a little bit too, like both in the meta context and the non-meta context, right? Of this is a game that releases at a time. I mean, look, all times in games history are like people are getting laid off, right? But
especially now.
Yeah, but now.
I just saw a statistic that was saying that 2024 layoffs equal 2022 and 2023 layoffs combined right now in the games industry. So
feeling
that's
good. Fun. So there's that. And like both in terms of this being, I mean, the team that worked on this was like 6 people, right? And was really like mostly 3 people. So, you know, both the idea of like, oh, this is what this like small group of people, real people can create working together, but also the sort of meta idea of this is a studio where I think they have like 4 fake developers, 4 fake directors, basically, like putting out this oeuvre of 50 games over this amount of time. I mean, you can't make 50 games in 8 years anymore, of course, but like you also more or less can't make like 3 games in 8 years with the same people anymore.
Yeah.
And studios that do can often be sort of notable and interesting for the like amount of expertise and knowledge that they bring to those games.
Yes, it's always like a notable news item now when like I remember around Rebirth releasing, they were talking about how they maintained like 90% of the staff, and they're maintaining that staff for the 3rd game too, which, you know, is not 3 games in 8 years because of the development difficulties on Remake, but like that's like notable news, right? Like maintaining a team. So it is, yeah.
And it's even, you know, the game itself is, you know, again, as a meta narrative, like charts a type of studio that like can't exist, like more or less can't exist anymore. There's like no space anymore for it to be like, you guys over there can make your weird little project.
Certainly not like, you know, I feel like you could have a team that you make a little like itch games every once in a while, you know, right. But that's not like your main income. No.
And that's what I mean. It's like nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, go make Bushido Ball.
Yeah.
You know, go make Party House. Go make Onion Delivery.
Yeah.
Right? I don't even mean those like literal games. Just like the idea of a studio making something that veers off from its sort of like established genre identity is sort of wild now. Especially given that everybody is ultimately now more or less under one of the big umbrellas. And so really what they're serving as is Sony's Knack studio or whatever. Just kidding. Sony's, you know, narrative drama studio, or Sony's 3rd-person shooter studio, or whatever it is.
You know what'd be really funny?
What would be really funny?
Sorry, this is off topic. You know, Neil Druckmann's been talking about his next game. It's got Troy Baker in it.
I haven't heard this. Okay, great.
You know what it should be?
What should it be? Knack 3.
Knack 3. I just think that would be a good, like, full circle sort of moment, you know?
Absolutely. But speaking of Knack, good segue, Emma.
Thank you.
This is a game. So Knack was trying to be a game for everybody, right? It was like, let me try to be all things for all people. Let me be approachable for someone who's never played games before. Let me also be fun for someone who's a gamer and buying the PS4 to be a gamer, right? And it pretty much failed. It's really hard. I mean, just in any kind of artistic medium, it's really hard to be all things for all people. You just have to have something that's really good or has something really appealing about it or is a total cultural juggernaut to be able to do that. And Knack, unfortunately, despite being a total cultural juggernaut, just could not achieve that.
Yeah.
UFO 50 takes this like very different approach, right? Of in some ways, it is trying to be a game that could appeal to anyone.
Yeah.
Right? But in like a very, very different way, and certainly not in a game-by-game way. This game becomes something that was like very appealing for all of these reviewers and like generally really appealing to people because like it doesn't care if you don't like game 12.
Yeah.
And like it's fine if you don't like game 12. And actually maybe it's kind of cool that you have game 12 that you don't like because like you don't have a choice to not buy that game, and maybe eventually you will want to go back to it. Mm-hmm. Or like it doesn't have to. It's like it's okay if there are games that like it takes a little bit longer for you to click with or to like figure out how they work because you can just play something else.
Yeah.
And you're captured in that ecosystem. So it's a very different style of trying to make a game for everyone, basically by making 50 games that are for like 2 people.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Even playing, like, the 15 games, you know, like, there were some that I spent more time with, and some that I was like, okay, maybe not right now, pretty immediately. Which is fine, right? Because you can immediately, like, be like, okay, this isn't what I want right now. Let me try one of the other 49 options I've got right here in front of me. Which is neat. Also very satisfying to play a game for the first time and watch the cobwebs blow off of it on the menu screen. Very fun.
Yes, the in-universe explanation is that the development team found these games like in a warehouse, lost, and they've like restored them for you, which is very, very real.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about the games much. There's like just too much to talk about. Like it's all this like sort of like 8-bit kind of style with like anything that you could imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I can say some of my favorites so far.
Please.
I liked Tactics, which I think was the first game they made for this. It's like you have units spawn on your side of the castle, and you can move them up and down, and then there's units spawning on the other castle, and you have to get a unit over to that castle to attack it, while also defending your castle by placing your units in opposition to their units, which is fun.
Yep.
I got stuck on level 6 and then moved on. But it was fun. I liked Devolition, which is a remake of a game, one of their freeway games they made in 1999, called Diabolica, where you set up like explosives that have different like explosive ranges, and you have to set off like a chain reaction to kill as many devils as you can, while not killing the townspeople that are also around the map. So you want to, at the end of a level, have the townspeople outnumber the demons, essentially, right? So that was fun. I liked Bushido Ball, of course, even though I lost every time.
Everybody loves Bushido Ball.
Like I said, I lost every time, but, you know, it's fun. Oh, and I don't know which one this was. Maybe Velgress? But there's one where there's like a helicopter with a bunch of little guys, and you have like a certain amount of little guys, and you have to like use them to platform your way across a level. Like they can turn into stone, they can turn into a bomb, or they can like fly forward and like get stuck in a wall so you can jump on them. So, like, you sacrifice your little guys to make, like, the way that you can platform across the level with the other little guys. Quite fun.
Cool stuff from UFO Studios.
Check in 5 weeks, and I'll tell you more games I liked, I guess.
If they will release it on Switch, I will play. Just for Mac. I want to play Party House. I want to play the Popularity Party Deck Builder. That sounds sick.
Everybody likes Rail Heist yet. Yeah.
I want to play Onion Delivery that everyone thinks is too hard. Bring it on.
Yeah. I'm
ready. It's also only $25, which is another like, oh wow, like it's nice that Spelunky went well for you kind of energy. Because in talking about it, they aren't like, oh, like, haha, like the economics of it. They were like, well, like we want people to play it. Yeah. And like people are probably kind of confused about what it is. So $25 felt like what we could charge for it. And at no point in this conversation are they like, well, we kind of needed to make some money.
Yeah. I got it on the autumn sale too, so it was like 25% off.
Wow, Emma's a bargain hunter.
It's me. It'll probably be off on the winter sale too, which is like a week from now because the autumn sale was really late.
Well, I can't play it. Everyone online was like, run whiskey on your computer. It's like, man, I just cannot become someone who
You could get a Steam Deck.
Don't say that to me.
You could get a Steam Deck.
Please don't say that to me. Get me one for... You've already bought my Christmas present.
I'm not going to buy you a Steam Deck.
Listeners, buy me a Steam Deck. Surely one of you wants to buy me a Steam Deck. Messages on Blue Sky. No, I just think, like, oh man, the idea of, like the myth-making around this, it's so sick. The, like, I'm like, making a fake company, and they have, like, fake things, and, like, things in their personal lives, and, like, it evolves over time. That's so cool. So cool. And, I just want to play it. And, like, nobody has ever, you just, like, can't make this. I don't know. Anytime a game like this comes out, I'm like, no one could ever make this again.
Yeah. I mean, probably somewhat true in this case. I mean, they could do it again, I guess, if they wanted to. Make UFO 52.
Who even has 50 ideas?
So true.
Remember that? What was the game we were talking about where they were like, you list all the ideas, and you list all the ideas again, and then you throw them out because none of them are Knack?
I don't know.
I know we talked about that I can't remember what episode that was.
We definitely don't come up with 50 ideas every episode, so...
I come up with 50 jokes.
You're right, yeah. And then you workshop them, and you test play them, right?
I rehearse them until I can deliver them flawlessly without cracking up.
Yeah.
I'm sure Emma has edited it out so that I sound very composed.
That sounds like me, yeah.
She often does that.
I do.
Sometimes she'll splice in totally different jokes.
That's true.
Emma doesn't believe in AI, but she does believe in an AI voice generator for me specifically.
It's just me, you know. Just me doing your voice, of course.
I actually stopped doing the podcast years ago.
It's just a really good editing job, you know. Record 2 tracks and somehow make it sound natural.
She scripts the whole thing. It's great. Okay, mashup time, huh? Time to mash. Monster mash.
Time to mash. 50 Knacks.
50 takes on Knack as the mascot character. Knack in every possible genre.
Knack 50.
Knack 50.
You know?
No, I actually in some ways think it's impossible.
I feel like the actual, like, closest in spirit mashup is like Astrobot.
Yeah. No, that's true. Like taking the PlayStation mascot character and like making a game that has like a bunch of games in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's actually not that's not a mashup at all, basically, right? Like
it takes the spirit, you know.
It sort of
takes some of the ideas.
The mashup would be if Knack had gotten like a release of some kind and spin-off games every year since the launch of the PS4.
Right. The alternate universe. That's what I'm saying, though. I feel like you could make like a game about like what if Knack
Donkey, are you listening?
What if Knack had been wildly successful, you know?
That could be something, actually, okay. Like, you couldn't do it actually with Knack. Sorry. It would have to be about, like,
you could make, like, a fake mascot.
Like a fake mascot character. Like a game dev sim, almost, about a fake mascot character.
Yeah. Which,
again, is, like, the mashups here are so spiritual.
That could be that would be an interesting, like, game spin on game dev sims, though, is, like, specifically trying to make, like, your mascot popular.
Yeah. Almost more like a sports game than
managing the image of your Mario or whatever, right?
I think you could get the FIFA heads on that.
Eventually you're faced with the question, do they have nipples?
Like the final boss question at a press conference. It's like, IGN here. Burning question. The New York Times. Cover story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, like, balance keeping your, like, artists, creatives happy and, like, the Metacritic scores. You go through periods where the Metacritic scores matter and where they don't.
Yeah.
Could be interesting. Could be something. Again, not really anything like either of these two games in spirit or experience, but, you know.
You don't jump at all in this game. You don't have a jump button.
They can't all be Knack 50. I think that's the best we're gonna do.
Yeah.
I just think UFO 50 is, like, essentially unmashable, given that it contains, like, essentially every possible game.
Yeah, that's fair.
And, like, what game? I'm trying to think, like, what game could I even mash it up with, without just being like, it's Knack 50.
Knack volleyball, baby.
Knack volleyball. That'd be dope. Robo volleyball is pretty good concept, honestly. Someone could grab that.
Yeah. Anything for more sports games is what I say.
Anything for more sports games.
Narrative sports games, I feel like I should say.
Emma is here in 2025 for the narrative sports game. Emma has been here for the narrative sports game.
I've been here since the start, you know.
The beginning of sports.
Since the beginning of sports.
And narrative. Remember, the possibility of a narrative sports game only began once narrative was invented.
You're right, yeah, of course.
So, much as Knack invented the goblin. Well, on that note, listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
If you enjoyed the show, you ought to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring Emma's arcane stuff. You can go back and read Split Screen. You can read Clickbait Boyfriends. Someday there'll be new Clickbait Boyfriend if there's ever new Kingdom Hearts, etc., etc., etc. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you ought to subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, take any variation of the word podcast and create a service, and you can probably find Talk This there. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. Next week is Side Quest. I think it's our 200th Side Quest next week, based on your blogs anyway.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Plus, that doesn't even count, like, ones that weren't numbered. So, who knows? It's my turn.
It is.
I should just do, like, a Game Awards recap, right? Just be, like, live blogging the Game Awards.
Oh, yeah, the Game Awards are this week.
Jeff! What if I just did a side quest on Jeff?
It's time to offer our gamer energy to Jeff. It's the yearly...
He feeds on it.
It's the yearly harvest.
I hope there's some good announcements, and I hope that Imagine Dragons plays.
Oh, they will. I believe it. They did the first time for the first season of Arcane, I think.
I know, and I hope that they do.
I'm sure they will.
Fingers crossed. No, I'll come up with something good and seasonal. Games for jet lag. Games
sure.
for transcontinental moves. Games.
Probably UFO 50 would be good for both those. And
well,
Knack, of course.
Wouldn't that be nice? If I could play it games that make you want to buy me a Steam Deck. Look forward to it.
All right.
That's this week's show, but what's in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, for our old game, we're going to talk about Final Fight.
Nice.
And for our new game, we're going to talk about Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Nice. Not the Final Fight.
Not the Final Fight.
Spoiler alert, I don't think it's the Final Fight.
I don't think so either. It's more final than I think the fantasy was.
True.
I don't think there have been 16 Final Fights.
Yet.
Final
Fight 50. Coming soon. All right, that's this week's show. Thanks for tuning in. Emma, I don't think you can, top my joke or anything, but,
no.
Send them out. Send them out.
Who could top that joke? This week, I hope that your time is Knack.
Baby.